Linebacker Devin White says he wants a trade from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, of course, immediately Steelers fans are saying, Omar Khan, go get him. Let's talk about that. We'll talk about what it would take and all the things to factor in, not just to Devin White, but to the linebacker position as a whole and what the Steelers could want moving forward. That plus other talk about the Steelers' needs at wide receiver and rumors about trade-up chances for the Steelers in the NFL draft. All that and more right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting app and especially on YouTube. Like this video on YouTube if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as all of our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And we're joined, as I said before, by Alan Saunders. He's back on the show yet again. Alan, it's great to have you, man. Alan, you see the notification from, I think it was like Adam Schefter or ESPN, somebody puts out that Devin White has requested trade. And in your mind, you know Steelers fans are coming. What was your first thought when Steelers fans started posting all over social media? Yeah, go get this guy. He's the other Devin. He's the Devin we really wanted back in 2019.
It's like the Squidward meme where he's just pointing and it's like, Steeler, get him.
yeah, that thing.
I think Devin White was a key part of Tampa's Super Bowl team, but like alone, he's not very good. Would I give him like a third round pick for him? Probably. I wouldn't want to sign him to a long-term contract. And I think that's where the contention is coming with Tampa, obviously, is they don't want to sign him to a long-term contract either. I mean, I've never understood it's not like Tampa doesn't have the money. They just unloaded Tom Brady's contract. They have cap space. Like, if the team that knows you the best thinks you're not worth a long-term contract, what do you think? Like, what does that say about you to a team that you're demanding a trade to? Like, why would people be lined up? Hey, you want this guy that the Bucs think is no good? No, he's their linebacker. They know him better than anybody else. Like, what? I think in general, the linebacker position is not one that we should be spending a lot of money on as a league. It doesn't seem like guys there make that big of an impact most of the time. I think teams are starting to learn that. I think you're going to see off-ball linebacker kind of become the new running back in that regard. But yeah, I'd stay out of this one if I was the Steelers. Like, well, hey, you want a bad offer? Sure, but like a real one, no, I don't think so.
If you look at Devin White's numbers, they haven't exactly been too flattering. Yes, he's finished with over 100 tackles in every year going back to right after his last 3 years. His rookie year was the one exception, and he's had those numbers. But he's also had high missed tackle rates. Pro Football Focus had him at a rate of 14% this past season, 15.6% the season before that. People talked about Devin Bush missing tackles. He missed 3.5% of his tackles this year, 6.8% the year before that. The most he missed was 12.9%. If only that was 1% higher. But if he missed 12.9% his second year when he only played less than half the season because of his injury, in comparison to a Devin White, that would have been the third best the second best, missed tackle rate of his career. And this isn't to say Devin White's a bad player. I just don't think that with the other needs the Steelers have right now, that it would be worth even a third round pick at this point. Because you know what you could get with a third round pick? A rookie off-ball linebacker who you can coach up on a rookie deal for the next 4 years and take as much of a swing at them fitting in as Devin White.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at that point, it's like, do you want Devin White for 2 years or do you want Dane Henley for 4? Right. I don't know. I'm not sure there's a right answer to that question. I think I'd probably do it for a third-round pick, but man, that's about it. And only because I do think like that second linebacker spot is pretty weak right now.
It
They're
is.
gonna need to draft somebody with that. So I mean, I don't know. Whatever. There's an athlete in there. There's a reason he was a high pick. Maybe you could work with him a little bit. I don't know. But the results in Tampa have not been encouraging. I don't see any real reason to think that that will just change with the change of scenery. I think Tampa has his value pretty well pegged, and that to me is the biggest red flag. It's not like Tampa's just broke and they're like, sorry, man, would love to, but we can't. You know, like the Bud Dupree conversation. Like that's not what's happening. Tampa's saying he's not worth the money he's asking for.
Yeah.
To me, that's just inviting a problem that the Steelers don't need. Yeah, I mean, I'd be pretty hands off about this. Linebacker in general, though, I mean, look, it's going to be hard to find answers there. You know, what the Steelers really need is like Ryan Shazier. That guy doesn't really exist though. Like there,
Yeah.
like there's only been one of
once
him.
in a while.
Yeah, like I just maybe it's Trenton Simpson. I don't know. He certainly has the athletic profile to be that. Doesn't always show up on the film. Maybe it is a guy like Henley. I don't know. But there's some options there at linebacker in the draft. There's not a ton of them. I think they'll probably be able to get one probably in day 2 somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I think in general we're seeing the league. I mean, if you think about those top guys, right? I mean, the Devin White and Devin Bush and you know, all those sort of Patrick Queen, all these guys that came out that were these like hyped up Roquan Smith, even though he eventually kind of worked out, took forever to get there. Like all these sort of hyped up linebackers that we've seen in the last 5 years have just really not panned out. And so I think, you know, we're going to see the league kind of pull back on the investment in that position a little bit.
I agree with you there. And it makes you wonder, you know, what's the future of that position? Like you said, running back has kind of become the, you know, the position that's supposed to be taboo in the first round. Is linebacker going to become that? And, you know, linebacker, it's been kind of been faded out. You know, there were critics who thought that drafting Devin Bush at all with the 10th overall pick was a bit of a reach even when it happened, just because, you know, the linebacker position, not even about Devin Bush, just about the linebacker position as a whole. But I still think it plays an important role, especially with the way the Steelers want to play defense. You need a run stuffer who can also help in coverage. They don't have to be elite. They don't have to be Ryan Shazier, but at least be competent and not just be like, you know, Cook John Bostic whenever he drops back. It's just like, well, that's a completion over the middle. And that makes you wonder, what is the best fit? Is it a Dion Henley because he's more of a run stuffer and a pass rusher than he is as much of a coverage guy? Is it Jack Campbell, who I think personally might be the best overall, you know, put them all together skill guy here? Drew Sanders, but he's more of a pass rusher. Trenton Simpson, probably the best athlete at linebacker. Or is it a later guy like Dorian Williams of Tulane, or DeMarvion Overshown, or Ivan Pace, Noah Sewell, or even Pitt's own Servassier Dennis if they wanted to wait that long? It's just a question to think of, how serious do you make of an investment to linebacker when you have these other needs that we're talking about that are kind of higher up in the pecking order of what people are saying is the most important positions in the NFL?
Yeah, I think really it's going to come to an acknowledgement that what the Steelers need from the linebacker position, they're not going to find in one person. I think they just need to find a way to split it up. And I think when you look at the signings they've made, look, I think Cole Holcomb is like a good effort at finding an all-around linebacker. I think he'll be a good fit for them, but he's not super different than what they've had in Miles Jack and Joe Schobert, some of these other guys. I mean, maybe he'll be a little bit better, but I expect them to get roughly the same amount of quality that they've had there. The other thing that is very interesting to me, though, is Landon Roberts is essentially just a run-stopping linebacker, right? He is not going to be a cover guy, right? So where's the other half of that role? Like if you have just the run guy, then you can have just the pass guy. And maybe it's not a linebacker at all. Maybe it's playing guys like Art Millette more. Maybe it's guys like playing like,
Keanu
Neal, right? I mean, like I think that's what we're seeing is like, hey, maybe that strong safety role was a lot for Terrell Edmonds, and maybe that inside linebacker role was a lot for Devin Bush, and maybe instead of 2 people, that should be 3, right? That should be a DeMonte KZ, that should be a box safety, and it should be a linebacker, and we'll position those guys depending on what we need. Do we need to stop the run? Do we need to protect against the pass? Are we playing the Bengals? Are we playing the Ravens? You know, I think the NFL offenses have gotten more diverse. I think that's one of the things that's happened over the last few years, is that we are seeing these teams are very, there's a lot of teams that are like the Cincinnati Bengals, right? You're getting 11 personnel every time. They're going to throw the ball. Sure, they can run with Joe Mixon, but that's not what's really going to kill you. Like, that's sort of like what's been the archetype of NFL offense for a while. But I think we're seeing more different teams that run the ball a lot, but they'll do it with a quarterback like a Philly or a Chicago, teams like Baltimore. I just think we're seeing more, the teams built more like the Tennessee Titans and the Cleveland Browns, built more like a traditional running game. I think you're just seeing more different kinds of offense at the same time than we've ever seen before. I think it's requiring defenses to be able to play in different ways. I think it's just putting too much stress on guys in those positions to be able to realistically expect to fill them with just one person, one athletic profile.
I hear you on that, and it's a complicated answer or step in this question as far as what should happen at linebacker, or particularly just off-ball help for the Steelers right now. A question that we'll keep examining as we get closer to the NFL draft. But Mel Kiper released his latest mock draft, and it had the Steelers taking a player in the first round that had Steelers fans going wild. Alan had some interesting responses on Twitter about it. I wanted to get to him on this show. We'll talk about that in just a minute on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, before we do any of that, love to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at Pro Football GM, Ultimate Pro Football GM, which is the ultimate phone game for you to go and prove that you have the GM skills to run your own football dynasty. If you've ever wanted to be an NFL GM, this is your chance. With Ultimate Pro Football GM, you can be the GM who gets the franchise. You build them up, you build the facilities, you build your coaching staff, you build out your roster. You can even pick who's your sports psychologist that keeps the mood of your team high. But you also drafting, making trades, signing players to long deals, and then watching them succeed or fail out there. You get 25 seasons for every time you're a GM, and you get to win as many Super Bowls as you can. I did 19 and 25. Right now, I've restarted another run here. I've got 17 Super Bowls and 19 seasons. Think you can do better? Prove me that you can by downloading this game. You can download it in any app store on your mobile device, or you can go to ultimate-gm.com right now, and it's free to download. So you can download it at any point in time, ultimate-gm.com or in a store today. Plus, Locked On listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise by using the promo code Locked On when you enter the game store for Ultimate Pro Football GM. Again, that's LOCKEDON, Locked On, all capital letters, all one word, and you'll get a 100% free boost to all your franchise stats on Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get to talking about, another mock draft. I know it was just Mock Draft Monday. We did that here on the show. But, of course, there has been some more mock drafts that are always done. And Mel Kiper, of course, Mel Kiper Jr.
Mel Kiper is too good for Mock Draft Monday. He has elevated himself above that.
He created mock draft. If you guys ever get tired of Mel Kiper, understand that the reason he gets to just say whatever he wants is because he built this. He researched upon research upon research before there were websites, before there were all this stuff. He would dig through books and he would assemble his big boards and he would create these conversations. He wouldn't always be right, but he would create the forum that now everyone like us use to talk about these things. So big respect to Mel Kiper Jr., even if you disagree with his takes. But in his latest mock draft that he released, I forget which 0.0 this is this 3.0 or whatever, but he had the Steelers taking not a corner, not an offensive tackle, not a defensive lineman, but a wide receiver, and an ACC wide receiver in Boston College's Zay Flowers. Now, if you don't know about Zay Flowers, he's 5'9", really explosive. He gave Pitt fits for during his career. There were times that he was too much to handle. But he's a guy that would immediately you plug into the slot, you get to play there. Mel Kiper saying Flowers is my top ranked wideout. I love his explosion and ability after the catch. He's a dynamo out of the slot, but he had plenty of grabs up and down, up at the side, on the outside too. Saying that quarterback Kenny Pickett had a special connection with former Pitt teammate Jordan Addison, but I think Flowers would be a better pick for the Steelers. And of course, Alan, that set Steelers Twitter ablaze because a wide receiver, have you seen this team? And there was you were one of the people that were counting the points. They were like, yeah, okay, sure, But a really good slot receiver wouldn't be bad right now because this offense does need to get better and it needs playmakers. Allen, get into is that too high of a place to take a slot receiver when you could still get some really talented slot receivers later in this draft class?
Well, all right, let me start here. I think I disagree with almost everything Mel said except for one thing. Okay. I don't think Zay Flowers is the best wide receiver on the board.
I agree.
Nor do I think he's the best fit for the Steelers. In fact, of the top group of wide receivers, I think he might be the worst. I also would not take Zay Flowers with a top tackle on the board as he did in his mock draft. He had Paris Johnson still on the board with the Steelers taking Zay Flowers. If they do that, Omar Khan might not survive the night in the city. Okay. But having said all that, I do think there are very realistic draft boards where for the Pittsburgh Steelers, wide receiver is best player available at a position of need. And I don't understand why people are so reluctant to admit that wide receiver is a position of need. I mean, okay. And this is where if we're talking about memes, right? If the last segment was Squidward, this is I'm Jon Snow at the Battle of the Bastards, like just me
and just take it
the
on
whole army
everybody
here, right? I'm ready. Okay, look, so I've already like the Steelers' options for a number 3 wide receiver are a 5'8" former 4th round pick who's coming off a major injury and has never played a single snap of NFL football in Calvin Austin, or a guy in Anthony Miller who has one catch after being cleared through waivers in 2021 and also is coming off a major injury. And by the way, when we were in training camp last year, those guys were like 2nd and 4th on the depth chart at slot receiver. This is not good. Like those are not good options, okay? If the Steelers at any other position were about to hand a starting role to a guy whose most recent notable transaction was going through waivers on a 4th round pick that has never played, that's coming off a major injury, people would be ballistic. For some reason, and I don't know why, Steelers fans have it in their idea that like having a 3rd good wide receiver is not important. I can't figure it out for the life of me. 3 wide receivers start. 60% of the snaps in the NFL were taken last year with 11 personnel, and a good percentage of those that weren't had more than 3 receivers on the field, not less, right? I mean, like you need a 3rd wide receiver is very important, and their first 2 wide receivers aren't that good. Like, okay, I like Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, but like, let's compare them to the Cincinnati Bengals, shall we? Like, they're not that good, okay? Like, there's plenty of other receiving cores that they fail to live up to, and Kenny Pickett is not as good of a quarterback as most of the rest of the good quarterbacks in the ACC, in the AFC. He was better than the ACC. He's not better than the AFC. He needs better weapons if he's going to succeed, not worse ones. Like, yeah, they need a good 3rd receiver. They need a good 3rd receiving passing option. And I think there are realistic draft boards where wide receiver is the best pick available at 17. I think there are realistic boards where it's the best pick available in a trade down scenario. Probably not trading up, but like I love Jackson Smith-Njigba. There's nothing about that guy's game that I don't want to.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely.
Quentin Johnson is a guy that I think you can dream on as like ridiculous traits and talent. Like maybe not the production that you want, but like at 17, absolutely, that guy's a pick. I wrote that I don't think Jordan Addison and by extension Zay Flowers really fits what the Steelers don't have, because both those guys, Austin and Miller, are smaller guys. Like if you want to add to the group, to me, a bigger, thicker guy is probably, a better fit. But like if they trade down and Addison's there at 25, yeah, I'm taking him. Yeah, I'd take Flowers there. The tackles are probably not going to be there. There might be a corner. There might not. I mean, I think there probably will be a corner. But I think wide receiver early is very realistic. It's also not a very deep wide receiver class. So if you want an impact talent, you got to take it early. We talked when we broke down corners last week, and by the way, you take my L here publicly in our little poll about who did the best job breaking down the cornerback class.
I was going to bring it up.
Okay, but I'm man enough to bring it up. All right. But look, I mean, all right, where do we have like Julius Brents and Emmanuel Forbes? Like those are like corner 5 or 6, right? Like To me, those guys are really good players. Like, I don't think that about the same place in the wide receiver class. So if you want to get an impact one, get them early. I don't know. Look, would a Pro Bowl left tackle be better? Yes, unquestionably. Would like the next Cam Hayward be better? Absolutely. But they're going to be draft boards where those guys aren't there an awful lot. I think wide receivers are a realistic other option. I'm not even sure the Steelers agree with me because they have not been that interested in the wide receivers that are projected to be there in the first round. But I think it's a little bit short-sighted to not give Kenny Pickett as many weapons as they can.
I get that. I get one of the other was as many weapons as you can. Now, here's another thing: Jackson Smith-Njigba. If he falls to 17, that's a different story. I just don't think he will. I think that too many teams are going to see that talent and say, "Yeah, get him on my roster." I don't think he gets past Green Bay at 15. But Quentin Johnson, I think he's another guy that someone's going to jump at. Just again, the traits are all there. But I agree with you. If the Steelers were to trade down, which we talked about yesterday when I talked to 3 different Locked On hosts who have teams picking in the mid-20s about what it would take for the Steelers to want to trade up and take the Steelers pick and what the Steelers could do there. If the Steelers did that, that would be a spot where I could see Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Josh Downs, one of those type of guys getting selected. But again, I think the Steelers would be fine waiting until the second or third round. I agree that this isn't as deep of a wide receiver class as is a corner class, but one general rule I've been finding in the NFL, it's always a deep wide receiver class. There's just so many talented receivers that just play football every year. I could pick about 15 guys that I'd be like, reasonably, I could take that. I could work with that guy. Even if you went past some of those top guys, I think Cedric Tillman of Tennessee is in there. Keyshawn Boutte, if that's how you pronounce his name.
He's interesting for sure. I mean, look, there are guys down there I like. Jaden Reed from Michigan State. I love Jaden Reed. And Parker Washington from Penn State has some injury questions. But, I mean, if you're looking for a slot guy, he's pretty much the mold. But, like, look, there are guys I like at wide receiver. There are guys I like at every position. I just think we're really sort of laser focused in on these positions. And it's not necessarily like I think the Steelers are wrong to want to tackle. Like I think they should, frankly, needed like 3 years ago to draft a tackle. But, it's just not the way the board always works out. The trades that you might want to make aren't always there. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Keep the options open. I can see very realistic draft boards where, to me, sitting there at 17 or trading back into the mid-20s where wide receiver ends up being best player available.
I could certainly see that. And again, I think it's keeping all your options open. I think that's what the Steelers are trying to do with the way that they've signed in people in free agency. I think it's something that they'll continue to look forward to how they'll handle. So what I think with both of our messages is don't get locked in on just one thing. Always be prepared to be able to shift and move and do different things. So with that being said, there's some shifting and moving that people are asking if the Steelers are going to do this year with a rumor about the Steelers being interested in a trade up with a specific team from the NFC North. Who's that? We'll talk about that in a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Don't go anywhere. I'm your host, Chris Carter, with Alan Saunders. We'll be right back. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, of course, rumors are always a-flying in draft season. That's what this is. And Ben Devine of Chicago NFL and Football EJ, who's of Bootleg Football Podcast.com. He's a draft analyst. He has a podcast, Bears Over Beers. Bears guy, basically. These guys who cover the Bears said that they reported that the Steelers had spoken to the Bears about a possible draft day trade that would include the Steelers' 17th overall pick, looking to move up to the Bears pick at 9th overall. Now, of course, I tweeted about this just giving out some facts. My point was just this. If you look at the trade value charts, it has the Steelers in the point values, and there's multiple trade value charts. I like to use Draft Tech, which is also used by Pro Football Reference and a few others. But even there's some more revised ones that have different point values. But in the 3 different types that I found, all the Steelers would have to do to match or even exceed the value of getting the 9th overall pick from 17 is just throw in their second round pick at 49, not even at 32, but at 49, and they'd have enough value to move up, get that pick, and then move on from there. Not that those charts determine everything because GMs or anything, but that seems like that'd be in play. And if the Steelers did do that, they could get one of those top offensive tackles. They could get one of those top cornerbacks that we've been talking about. It would also be hilarious with the Bears, because then basically the Steelers would have just swapped their lower first and second round picks for the Bears' higher first and second round picks, all for just Chase Claypool, which would just be like, I feel like the Bears just have to say no to this on principle, because you fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you. Frankly, the Bears still should be shame on them for getting fooled the first time with that. But point being, I don't think that this is. I think this is just Omar Khan just doing his due diligence, just calling around. Hey, if this was to happen, what would you need? Just so that there's not as much panicking on day one night when you have 20 minutes to decide and you're going through things. Alan, what's your read on the Steelers potentially trading up and how much it would cost versus the reality of if the Steelers would do it with all the needs that they have?
Yeah, well, I'm sure Omar's talked to not just Ryan Poles, but basically every GM in the league about, if we came up to where you are, what would that cost? If we came down to where you were, what would you want? That's, I think those conversations are basically ubiquitous. I don't really think that there's any, I threw a headline on it today on the site, but that's not news, honestly, to me. I hope he talked to all of them. He probably is not doing his job if he didn't, right? I think the Bears are interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, Omar and Ryan have already made a deal together. They clearly can work things out. It's always easier for teams to trade with teams in the opposite conference. You don't feel so bad. Things go badly later because you don't have to deal with it and see it in your face. Not like the Steelers are trading with the Ravens, right? You're not going to see that very often. I think 9 is an interesting place for the Steelers to move up to if they have a strong preference about who the best tackle in the draft class is, because to me, that is probably where the first tackle will come off the board. If it is not the Chicago Bears, by whoever they're trading down with. That to me seems like a pretty good place for that to happen. So if they think that Paris Johnson is a lot better than these other two, I happen to think that, but I don't know if they do. Maybe they think it's Peter Skoronski. I don't know. But if they have a strong preference, that's the place you probably need to go up to get one. Now, if they just want to get one and they don't care which one it is, I think a trade with the Jets or the Patriots somewhere in the lower teens feels a little bit more realistic to me. You don't have to give up quite so much to move up that far. And I would be skeptical about trading up for a corner. It's just such a corner deep class.
It is a corner deep class.
And in corner, you don't have this until you get to the slot only guys who are way back down our list, like in the 8, 9, 10 range. Until you get to them, it's not like there's this difference between left tackle and your left corner and right corner like there is left tackle and right tackle. To me, there's a much bigger difference in getting a guy who you feel like is protecting Kenny Pickett's blind side because he's a starting left tackle than, there are other guys that I think are good picks for the Steelers. We're talking about late in the first round or early in the second round, guys like maybe a Darnell Wright or a DeJuan Jones, but I think those guys are probably more right tackle types. And so you have this difference where if you want to get one of those guys, you probably need to go up to get it. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Steelers. The one downside is, just in the sheer number of picks. I think they can recoup that. I think when we've talked before, I think Omar is quite interested in the idea of trading down from 32 with having, you're talking about 8 minutes between picks, having 18 hours between picks, right?
Exactly.
I think he's very interested in auctioning that pick off to the highest bidder for whoever falls in love with the pick. And that's where you can see guys get away from that draft value chart because, really the market drives these things. Those teams, they don't really use those charts. Those charts are sort of reflective of what teams have done.
They're more like guidelines.
Yeah, I don't even think that it's not like a guideline. It's more like the chart is sort of estimating.
I was just making a Pirates of the Caribbean joke, but continue.
They're putting to paper the things that have already happened, right? Here's what the trades that have been made before have valued these picks at. But the actual picks get traded based on what the market is, nothing to do with the chart. And so if you can get a number of people to fall in love with a guy there at 32, you can trade down and get a lot more than you would trading down that many spots at a slightly different place in the draft. So I wouldn't worry too much about giving up one pick to move up. I think with 3 picks in the top 50, the Steelers have a ton of draft capital if they want to go do it. To me, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure specifically the Bears are the right place, but I think it makes a lot of sense to go up there if they really want to tackle and they really are tired of chasing this problem around, which has been a problem for years, and just want to solve it.
I certainly get what you're putting down there because, like you said, the Steelers have been in a position where tackle has just. Again, I brought this up before. If there's one position where historically the Steelers don't have a superstar, like legendary player, it's offensive tackle. You could say tight end too. Heath Miller, I think, kind of filled that void a little bit. Not that he's a superstar, but he was a guy that was kind of like universally respected. But like you look at all the superstars at center, guard, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, edge rushers, interior defensive linemen, linebackers, corner safeties. The Steelers got all of them. But offensive tackle has never been their big thing, and maybe it's time to make that happen. And that's the one way I can see this working out. Now, again, I'm not all that certain the Bears would just give up that ninth slot without getting more of a payout. Because here's the thing, and it is what the constant thing to remind everyone about when you're talking about trades. When we're looking at those charts and we're putting those numbers to things, that's just to help guide as far as what we would understand the capital that would take to make such a move. But understand those capitals go out the window as soon as also when another team calls in and says, okay, yeah, but we want to beat your trade. And we want to make that. And then that's what you're hoping Omar Khan is doing for the 32nd overall pick, because then he's not just taking a call from the Broncos because they want to move up and get the pick, or the Vikings or whoever. He's taking a call from 5 different teams and playing them off each other. Well, you know what? Denver offered me 2 third-round picks, to move down in the second round. Or, you know what? This team offered me 2 second-round picks. What you got for me? I think that's something that you always got to remind yourself of. It's and it's one of those things that, like, again, this is all speculation, but what we're trying to do here is paint the picture of when you see this type of information floated out there. This is how you compartmentalize it and try to understand, like, hey, okay, yes, that's exciting. There's some good thoughts behind this. But let's actually understand what would be the purpose, what would be the frame for it, and the reality of if it could be pulled off and how it would best benefit the Steelers.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the same. You can say all the same things about trading down too, right? I mean, it's all the same conversations. But I think trading up from 17 is realistic, and I think the idea that what the Steelers really need not being there at 17 is also very realistic. And so being proactive about, okay, what do we want to do then if it turns out to be a bad board, right? It turns out like all 3 top tackles, all 3 top corners are gone. What are we going to do? Are we going to keep that from happening and move up? Are we going to trade down? What's the best fit for the Steelers? And it's all about part of the process is finding out what it's going to cost to make those moves.
I hear you on that. There's going to be a lot to discuss as far as what it's going to cost to make those moves when we get closer to draft day too, because there's going to be more conversations about different teams that might want to trade with the Steelers to get there. We'll have all the different perspectives right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But Alan also gives you plenty of perspective with his website, SteelersNow.com. Alan, tell them what they're missing out if they're not checking you out on all the different places to find you.
Oh, man, it's been a good week at SteelersNow.com. Let me tell you what, I photoshopped Andy Weidel and Omar Khan into an RV
that was actually
today,
really funny.
because they've been finding the beef on the free agent menu this offseason. I got a couple good stories this week. I'm not a horn tooter as it was, but I read a good story about Cole Marcoux, guy who I think is a bit of a rising star in the Steelers front office, how he got his start into football. Kind of interesting. I read a story about the original Mr. Irrelevant. I did not know that the first time they called the last guy in the draft Mr. Irrelevant was a Pittsburgh Steeler, 1976. So I broke down the history of that and how it became a thing, and the story carries through to the present day. Tate Crowder, Steelers backup inside linebacker, was Mr. Irrelevant, and obviously Brock Purdy has been the most relevant Mr. Irrelevant. So it's been a good week at SteelersNow.com. Go over there and check it out. Oh, we ripped the Pittsburgh Maulers for throwing out the first pitch in Cleveland too. Got to have a little bit of that in there. So yeah, we got all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, what kind of joke was that? You either are for Pittsburgh or against Cleveland. You are not both. You're not a LeBron. LeBron's gone. He's with the Lakers right now. So chill out with that nonsense. It's the only time I think it was an excuse where a Pittsburgher might have rooted for anything Cleveland. But anyways, you can find him, Alan Saunders, at SteelersNow.com or his Twitter handle at Saunders_PGH to get all his takes. You can find me, Chris Carter, your host of the Locked On Steelers podcast, right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast that you can get anywhere on podcasting platforms, but especially on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our daily episodes. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques, where if you follow me and you can get all my stuff, you can also read me at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where I cover all things Pitt athletics there, and post-gazette.com to get all of the good stuff that we work there with my partner. And if you want to support the Locked On Steelers podcast, go on Apple Podcasts right now and check us out and give us a 5-star review with a positive comment. You do both at the same time, and you get a special shout out at the end of the show, like this person, 88 Marty C, who says, Chris is one of the best sports podcasters I've ever listened to. Knowledgeable, fun, and overall a great listen. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Great Steelers podcast. Thanks so much, Marty. Appreciate you with the 5-star review.
Ladder goes a long way, Marty.
I appreciate that. And we have another 5-star review we'll read on tomorrow's show. Thanks so much for that, and we'll give you guys more shout outs. Thanks again, Alan, for joining us, and thank you for all for listening to us. Back Thursday with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.